It's a sense of well-being. It's a feeling of belonging. It's the ability to laugh and cry and still be happy. It is the awareness, and this is, I think, most important for me, it's the awareness of our feelings. That when we walk around, that we are aware of what it is that we're feeling in any given moment, in any given experience, and we are not judging them. We're not saying, well, gee, I'm feeling sad and that's bad. Rather, we're saying, well, gosh, I'm feeling sad and I'm happy that I understand what I'm feeling. I'm happy that I can interact with this feeling in my consciousness in a way that's healthy, in a way that perhaps can transform it into a more pleasant sort of experience. And so happiness comes out of that sense of awareness of our feelings and who we are. Feelings are not the product of unhappiness. They're the result of being connected with life. And this is the way I see negative feelings are not the product of unhappiness. They are the result of being connected with life and showing up in the world. And so when we are having lots of different kinds of feelings in our consciousness, it means that we're connected. It means that we're showing up in the world. It means that we're participating and engaging in the experience of the world. And so that's something to be happy about. You see how that process sort of works if we begin to flow with it. One of the gifts that my father gave me was the gift of moving past anger quickly. And I don't know if he probably did it just out of habit, but I gave him lots of opportunities to be angry at me. And he would get angry at me for whatever mischief that I might have gotten into at whatever given point. But then he would be over it quickly. The anger would be there, he'd be over it quickly, and then he would start laughing about it, whatever the activity was or whatever the thing that he was angry about. He would, it was always astonished me because sometime later he'd remember some of these little things and he'd tell the story. The story of, well, this is the story. And then he would laugh about it. And what it did for me is it helped put those things into their proper context. That I began to understand that it wasn't about me, it was about what happened, and that he loved me, and because he loved me, he could laugh about what happened. And in the laughing about what happened, I would learn what I needed to learn about that experience. Because I wasn't defensive about it. I didn't have to apologize for something that a child would do that didn't really understand what they were doing. And I'm not going to tell you any stories about those just because I don't feel it's appropriate. Jesus laid out the premise for how we create a life of purpose and happiness. I think he really made it really clear. And it's in one of his statements in the Sermon on the Mount. Actually, towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he tells us how to pray, and he also talks about what the process is. And so what he says, and I sort of have a different kind of a take on this particular passage as it relates to what we're talking about today. He said, "Ask and it will be given, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened unto you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or which of you, if his child asked for bread, would give him a stone? Or if asked for a fish, would give a serpent? If you then who err know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Creator who is in heaven give good things to those who ask? So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do so to them, for this is the law and the prophets." Now, here's the way this shows up for me. That, first off, it's a statement of the law of cause and effect. That so whatever you do for others, or whatever you wish to have done to you, do for others. It's sort of a reverse sort of process. But what we understand is that whatever we wish to bring into our lives is how we live. It's what we do. It's how we show up. And it's not just in the verbiage. That prayer is important, asking is important, knocking is important, and those verbal sorts of things are important, but really more so than that, the asking and the seeking and the knocking is how we show up in life. It's the things that we do. It's the things that we put forth that cause the goodness to come back to us. In other words, we're setting up by our actions, by our thoughts, words, and deeds, we're setting up the happiness that is going to flow into our life. So if we choose to pursue happiness, one of the most powerful ways to pursue happiness is to do good things in the world, to have good thoughts and to take positive, right actions in the world. And that's what I believe he's saying. If you ask, if you step forward and do something good, then that prayer, because that is a prayer, is it not? Every thought, word, and action really is a prayer. So if that is a prayer, then we send that prayer forth and it will be answered. As it was sent forth. As you give, so you receive. As you send that energy forth, it comes back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over for our greater good, whatever that is. And so if we choose to send forgiveness forward, we receive forgiveness. If we choose to send love forward, we receive love. And we start that cycle of energy, and I believe that's what Jesus was empowering us to do. That's how much we have engaged in the creative energy of life and how it can show up for us. There was a fellow that I knew when I was a minister down in Reno, Nevada. And this fellow, his name is Ed Carlson. And he is affectionately known by the people around the Reno, Carson City area as the Waver. And for 30-some years, he has walked the streets of Nevada just waving and smiling at people. And he's kind of a Jesus-like figure in the desert, you know, kind of roaming around. He's kind of dressed like a hippie. He's getting pretty old now, you know, so his smile has more lines in his face and whatnot. But I think he's still out doing it. But I came across this article that was written about him in the Nevada Travel Journal of 2006. And it's written by a fellow named David Toll. He said, "I felt a sudden flash. Was it joy? In Reno the other day when I saw Nevada's only living saint performing his ongoing miracle, the Waver. Ed Carlson was walking along West Liberty Street smiling and waving at the oncoming cars. He's been doing this for more than 30 years, and for most of that time, he was a familiar figure along US 395 between Reno and Carson City, smiling and waving, smiling and waving, smiling and waving. In the early days, he provoked astonishment, suspicion, and sometimes resentment from the drivers he greeted. Now almost all of them smile and wave back. In an article by the Reno Gazette-Journal, writer Guy Clifton, I learned that before he came to Reno, Ed had hitchhiked across the USA blindfolded. Clearly this man is capable of mighty deeds. Once he got here, he became a familiar figure striding along beside the road, waving and smiling as he made his way from Reno to Carson City and back again. His greeting was a gift that he gave endlessly. 32 years ago, I had awakening," reads a note he hands out in response to questions. "It came to me that I should start walking and be love. I should express love by waving. His expression of love has lifted the spirits of tens, hundreds of thousands of us, ordinary mortals, as we briefly connect with him, take his benediction, and are swept past enlightenment, however briefly and imperfectly. Thanks, Ed."